Welcome back, everybody, to the Orlando Regional Championships. My name is Maeve O'Rourke. I am here with Joe Brown. I did get it right that time. Wasn't going to mix that one up again. And I think as well, for both Toler and James, right? They're going in, they're at their halfway point. They know once this round is over, everything gets a little bit, they're really kind of getting to the end game of the day. And at this point as well, for both of those trainers, they get to kind of, I think, go back through the information that they've learned throughout the day of this matchup's hard for me, this one's easy. These are the players that I'm going to possibly be seeing later at the current record I'm at.
Yeah, and one of the benefits with open team sheets is you don't have to necessarily worry as much. Obviously, there are some things you want to preserve information on, like potential speed tiers. If you are using a Flutter main that's not fully invested in speed or something like that, you might not want to reveal that if you don't have to. But your generic move choices and stuff, since that is openly available on your team sheet, it's not as imperative to try to hide that information anymore.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes the things that trainers are going for with the secrets that they're keeping is how their Pokemon are trained. It's my Pokemon is actually going a little teeny tiny bit slower than the Pokemon next to it, so that the Pokemon next to it can do something that helps, Pokemon B can help Pokemon A by doing something that first move. So I think at that point, right, that's kind of where the trainers are hiding their surprises in their team. And it does allow for, I think, some interesting team building when you know that all the rest of that information is out in the open. And I think for both Toler and James, it will kind of come down to what they see on that team sheet and how they think that this matchup is going to go for them, what their leads are going to be, kind of the strategy that they both expect to be bringing.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to see how different trainers build their teams and how they synergize, and different examples over the years of, like, for example, a max speed Incineroar with Focus Sash, and you just don't care about being bulky at all, or a whole bunch of speed on Snorlax, which is really a really slow Pokemon, but you want to outspeed the other Snorlax back in 2018, things like that. So I think we have that now with Iron Hands because of Fake Out, which is similar to what Incineroar did it for, was if you just put no speed, just all bulk, you're pretty much going to lose every Fake Out speed tie that you have. But if you try to invest just a little bit, take out a little attack to be a little bit quicker, that might be the difference between a win and a loss. But our players are on stage right now. James Baek and Toler Webb, 5-0. They're finding each other. Only one of these guys is going to leave the stage at 6-0.
Yeah, exactly. And the other player is going to still have a lot of Pokemon to play. They're going to have to still kind of fight through, I think, what the rest of it is going to be. Joe, when we get to kind of finally commentate together, you and I were excited about thinking about it?
Is it the Sandy Shocks?
No, but it is the Great Tusk.
Okay, well, I guess I ruined your bit. I'm sorry. I was just so excited. I was excited about Sandy Shocks. We talked about that at the beginning of the day, too.
We did talk about that at the beginning of the day. It was, oh, wait. Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
It is Sandy Shocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So one player had a Great Tusk, one player has Sandy Shocks. So I think I'm actually quite excited to see our exciting friend, that prehistoric Magneton, kind of come out here, show exactly what it can do. It is not actually paired with an Espathra, though. You'll see on James's team, it is paired with the Golden Go, Talonflame, Brute Bonnet, Tatsugiri, and Dondozo. Whereas for Toler, it is that Fluttermane, Great Tusk, Iron Bundle, Talonflame, the Tyranitar, and the Gothitelle. So interesting to see that Tyranitar as well. I don't think we've gotten a real good chance to look at that today, but you can see why you bring it with that Great Tusk.
Well, back in Toler's day, Tyranitar was a really strong Pokemon, so I think some of these new kids around the block might not be expecting the Tyranitar to come out, because it has not really seen too much prevalence in Scarlet and Violet, especially not without Lycanroc as well. So Toler does not have that on the team, so maybe Tyranitar has a little bit of a different role in this matchup. But looking at James's team, one of the things with Sandy Shocks is it is deceptively fast. When you look at some of the other Paradox Pokemon, you're like, yep, I get why Iron Bundle is so fast. It looks like it. You wouldn't necessarily think that Sandy Shocks is, but it's pretty fast. And James's team overall, you have Talonflame that can set up Tailwind, having Gale Wings priority as well when at full HP. Tatsugiri is fast, giving the speed boost over to Dondozo when you use that combination. So there could be some really fast things on James' side that Toler would like to deal with something like the Gothitelle potentially, or Icy Winds from Toler's Iron Bundle as well to lower James' speed might be another way to really help out. You can't perfectly know everything going into game one, and when you are playing against such a great player like James, he's not going to just give you a bad turn one like that. But those are things that Toler can look into, is trying to gain a speed advantage over James's quicker team.
Yeah, and I think at that point too, right, Toler Webb's team, it doesn't immediately scream hard Dondozo counter like you sometimes see when you see something like that Perish Trap, or even something that has Intimidate swapping in and out, whether that be that Aqua breed Paldean Tauros, or even the Blaze breed Paldean Tauros, or the Arcanine, which we've seen quite a lot today. Something I think that's interesting to me as well is James is running Brute Bonnet. We have seen a lot more Brute Bonnet today than I expected that we would. It has really been showing up for a lot of these trainers, and you can see why, because it is like that Amoonguss, but faster and more offensive.
Yeah, that combination is really the difference. It's Amoonguss, but faster, but also weak to Fairy, and Amoonguss is one of the greatest parts about Amoonguss is you switch in on Dazzling Gleams, and Brute Bonnet is not able to do that. So I think what you gain in offensive pressure that Brute Bonnet provides, you actually lose in versatility and switchability when you want to switch in onto a hit, because Brute Bonnet cannot take it traditionally as well as Amoonguss can. But it does pack a much larger punch, especially with loaded dice on James's side there, because you're going to be hitting either four or five times with your Bullet Seed guaranteed every single time, and as a grass type, that damage really does amplify up.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really nice to have, especially into Pokemon like Tyranitar, like Great Tusk, even like Iron Bundle, especially if that Iron Bundle is, it gives you a lot of options. Even though it is neutral damage, it is still damage, and that Iron Bundle is a bit of a glass cannon, so it will help just to put out some pressure at the bare minimum onto these Pokemon. Toler, though, going to be bringing that Talonflame and Flutter Mane right out of the gate versus Tatsugiri and Brute Bonnet. So one fast team and one team that could slow them down.
Yeah, that's what you have to worry about. If you are Brute Bonnet, not only do you have to worry about the Fairy type attack from Flutter Mane, but Talonflame as a Fire Flying type can hit you super effectively in both of those slots. So if James wants to commit the Terra this early on, you can definitely go for it. But usually you want, on a Dondozo team, you'd like to try to preserve it for your big mascot on the team. And it looks like in this game, James is a steal compared to the earlier Dragon type Dondozo that we saw in our previous match together. But for now, Toler has to worry about the switch in at any time from James. Brute Bonnet could switch into Dondozo, and then any attacks targeted towards Tatsugiri would be avoided.
Yeah, it looks like there is going to be a Terra early in the game, though. During turn one, it is going to be a Terra on to this Brute Bonnet into the Fairy typing, so that you do not take that super effective damage from something like a Dazzling Gleam or a Moonblast. Allows you to take those way more comfortably than you normally would. And the taunt from the Talonflame into the Brute Bonnet is going to possibly stop it from going for something like a Rage Powder or a Spore. Dazzling Gleam from this Flutter Mane into both of these Pokemon brings the Tatsugiri down to its Focus Sash, that even though a critical hit would have been nice to kind of break through there, Brute Bonnet does handle that so much better with that Terra typing there. Tatsugiri's Muddy Water will connect onto both of these Pokemon. It brings the Talonflame down. Also, no Focus Sash there, but does a ton of damage. The Bullet Seed here as well from this Brute Bonnet into the Flutter Mane. No fear here in terms of going for something like that taunt when you just immediately go for those strong attacks. Thanks to those loaded dice, you have enough hits to knock out that Flutter Mane. You take away a big threat early in the game to your own Dondozo. And
that's why a lot of people are really running loaded dice as the main item of choice on Brute Bonnet, because getting a guaranteed 4 at minimum, or hopefully sometimes 5 hits of the Bullet Seed is just super valuable out of that Pokemon. You've also seen it on Pokemon like Excalibur as well back in San Diego. But here is our great Tusk action at this point. Tatsugiri is already 1 HP, so I don't know if Toler is too concerned about what Tatsugiri wants to go for in this moment, since you might want to protect. So now you are available to try to target down the Brute Bonnet.
Yeah, that Will-O-Wisp from this Talonflame is going to definitely make this Brute Bonnet's attacks not as strong, going to make it a little bit tougher to maybe get the offensive pressure that you want to have moving forward. Great Tusk going for an Earthquake, won't hit into that Protect on the Tatsugiri, and thanks to that Talonflame's Flying type, will not deal with that, but it will still go into this Brute Bonnet, and it is still going to take a good chunk of damage. Does not bring it down into the red, but really close. Firing back with a Bullet Seed, this burn might pay off huge here. 1, 2, we're gonna hit bare minimum of 4, but I think with this burn, right, it definitely makes it do way less damage than they were hoping for.
Yeah, definitely, and there is the 5th hit of it, so you get a little bit more for James. It looks like through the burn with Life Orb Recoil, another one would be enough. to knock out Great Tusk, but I'm not sure if Toler is going to let him get in that position to just freely hit the Great Tusk like that. That Will-O-Wisp was a really pivotal in this match because it looked like Brute Bonnet was a lot of the damage provided from James' side, and as we have the benefit of seeing that Dondozo is actually not even in the squad here for James in game one. So it is definitely going to have to be a different strategy if he wants to win this one. Could be the Golden Go in the back or Sandy Shocks as well.
Yeah, I love when they do not bring Dondozo with Tatsugiri. I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. Talonflame once again going for a Will-O-Wisp here, but it does target into the Brute Bonnet, expecting a switch. Great Tusk once again going for an Earthquake. This should knock out both of these Pokemon here on the opposite side for James. James is going to have to bring in his last two Pokemon. We already know what they are in the back, so that is going to be, I think, a little bit different. The Sandy Shocks may be the Pokemon that struggles a little bit with this Great Tusk because of things like Earthquake, because of things like Headlong Rush, and the Golden Go as well. Not going to be the happiest of campers in front of a Pokemon that can do super effective ground type damage.
No, definitely not. It looks like this Great Tusk is a really nice call in this matchup because you have so many things you can hit with it super effectively, and because the Terra was used on the Brute Bonnet already, that means Sandy Shocks or Golden Go are not able to try to have a defensive Terra typing to save themselves from this Earthquake on Great Tusk side. So it looks like Toler's just in a really strong, aggressive spot, letting the Flutter Mane take the damage early to get Great Tusk in safely, and then the Will-O-Wisp provided from Talonflame was also crucial. But now it's time for Toler to use their Terastallization.
Yeah, Toler here going for the Terastallization onto that Great Tusk is going to be ground. So this is a very offensive Terra typing here. You are going to try and boost those attacks like Earthquake, like Headlong Rush, especially, at this point, Sandy Shocks going for a Protect makes a lot of sense here. It is not trying to take all of that damage. Tailwind from this Talonflame, it has been sitting on this field with probably 2 HP there, and the Great Tusk's Earthquake is only going to hit into this Golden Go. Golden Go is not going to enjoy taking this much damage, especially thanks to all of that extra pressure from that Terastallization into that ground typing. I don't think it is going to be able to hang on here, and absolutely not. So that is enough for that Golden Go. It wasn't able to get any of the pressure that it really wanted this turn, maybe hoping for a Headlong Rush into its partner.
Yeah, that's a tough call from James. You're already on such a back foot, and you see the forfeit locked in there because you kind of understand with how that turn went. Sound like Sandy Shocks can do anything into the ground type. And that is one of the benefits of offensive Terra typing, or Terra usage, I should say, from Great Tusk and Toler. As it was already a ground type, it gets even stronger ground attacks when you use a ground Terra. So the Synergy with Talonflame right next to it, you have a free E Earthquaker you can use next to it. You don't have to worry about hitting your own teammate, because that's some of the tricky areas. Maybe James can try to get Toler into a spot where you can't necessarily freely click Earthquake. Maybe try to have something that would take the damage there and force him to use that Headlong Rush, which has a lot more drawbacks.
I think it's time for Dondozo. I think it's
You
time
might
for
as well,
Dondozo,
yeah.
right? I think Dondozo might be the Pokemon you want to bring in here because Great Tusk was such a hard counter to so many Pokemon on your team, right? Golden Go does not want to stand in front of it. Sandy Shocks does not want to stand in front of it. Brute Bonnet was not all that happy standing in front of it either, even with that Terastallization as well. And by the fact that you used your Terastallization onto that Brute Bonnet meant you could not use it on one of your other Pokemon. That Sandy Shocks, it is Flying Terra.
That'd be pretty good against Earthquake.
So that would be really nice against something like Earthquake, where you cannot do that much damage. The Golden Go is Steel, so it is going to still take all of that damage from something like an Earthquake. But if your Sandy Shocks could possibly use that Terastallization instead of using it on that Brute Bonnet, that might be the way that you kind of counteract what that Great Tusk can do to you. It's instead going to only be able to hit you possibly with something like Close Combat instead. And, I think that at that point, it makes it a little bit more of an interesting matchup because you're playing around that instead of kind of putting your Terra early and kind of hedging all your bets.
And I think one of the benefits that Toler has in one of the traditional ways we can still preserve information is that Toler did not reveal his fourth Pokemon in that match. You only saw the Flutter Mane, Talonflame, and Great Tusk. So James, not only did he lose without Dondozo, but he actually didn't even gain the information of what was Toler's full, breadth of options against his team. He didn't even get to that fourth Pokemon, so that's an even bigger advantage for Toler.
Do you have a guess, Joe? Because my guess is Iron Bundle.
I think it's the Iron Bundle or the Tyranitar, because of Assault Vest is really strong with Tyranitar and the sand as well. You're kind of getting like 2 boosts to your special defense, so it could have been Tyranitar, but I'm not really sure. We don't even know.
It is now currently, though, past Paradox plus Talonflame for both of these trainers. On James's side, it is that Sandy Shocks, whereas for Toler, it is the Flutter Mane, like we saw the exact same lead from game 1. That Photosynthesis there, thanks to that booster energy, going to boost that special attack. Again, I still think this might be time for a Terra Sandy Shocks.
Yeah, I think this is a much better lead from James as well, or I like this lead, I should say, because you do punish the Talonflame. You tell Toler, if you would like to stay in and go for Will-O-Wisp or Tailwind or taunting any of my Pokemon, you're going to have to eat an attack from Sandy Shocks, which is really not that possible, and I'm going to win the speed tie anyway.
Yeah, that Tailwind being huge going first. The opposing Tailwind, though, from that Talonflame, it would have been interesting if it was something like a taunt, because you then would have already gotten the Tailwind off. Earth Power, though, into the Flutter Mane is just under 50% to that Pokemon, whereas Moonblast from this Flutter Mane to the Sandy Shocks does a ton of damage and gets the special attack drop. That is exactly what you wanted to see if you were Toler.
That is unfortunate for James there to take so much damage that, and the special attack drop really pretty much stops the idea of terrestrializing Sandy Shocks in this match, because it's just really, it's not strong enough and it doesn't have a lot of time left in the match. But now that the Tailwind is matched on both sides for the trainers, the species are essentially back to normal, meaning at any point, Toler's Talonflame, if it wants to try to target down the remaining HP that Sandy Shocks has, it can definitely try to go for that, and that is why James is so terrified of it with that Protect.
Yeah, Protect this turn, meaning it is not going to take any damage from the opposing Talonflame's Brave Bird. It is going to allow possibly for you to get damage onto that Talonflame yourself if you really want to with your own Brave Bird. Brave Bird into that Talonflame, again, just under 50%. You do take that recoil damage. Flutter Mane going for that Shadow Ball here on the opposite side of the field is a ton of damage as well, but still not enough to knock out, so we are hanging on with just slivers of HP.
Yeah, the Brave Bird into the opposing Talonflame brings it down to almost half, but it's not like Talonflame's really known for its bulk, so any types of attacks can really knock it out. Where if a Brave Bird put Flutter Mane down a little bit lower, maybe something in the back would be able to handle it later on. So right now, Toler has 2 half-health Pokemon, and we're still in the same spot that James is still worried that while Sandy Shocks is on the field, it's not going to be able to get any attacks off if it gets targeted down. And there's their Brave Bird into Flutter Mane.
That Brave Bird was enough to get that knockout, which was huge for James to get rid of that right now. You do take that recoil damage, but you're still able to hang on. Talonflame using the Brave Bird onto the Sandy Shocks is enough to knock out that Sandy Shocks as well. It is still going to be taking, I think, a little bit of recoil on top of that, but is looking healthier than the one on James's side.
And as we see the last 2 that James has with Brute Bonnet and Tatsugiri, Tailwinds are still matching for both of these sides, but that Brave Bird coming out 1 turn later could have been a spot so you would have had the Pokemon advantage and forced Toler to bring out one of his other Pokemon in the back. So definitely still a strong position for James as he got that knockout, and you can switch Brute Bonnet in with Tailwind up, trying to be a little bit faster. You do have Terra Fairy still available at this point because it was not used on the Sandy Shocks in that first couple of turns, but with the Great Tusk coming back out for Toler, this does look like it is a Terra Fairy Brute Bonnet game potentially, and then those loaded dice without being burned, those loaded dice bullet seeds can be a lot more effective into Great Tusk, so James has to be worried about that.
Yeah, and I think right now, because you had that chip damage on the opposing Talonflame, if you can get that faster Brave Bird, you could get the knockout. You will lose your own Talonflame, but I think that's a trade you're happy to make if you're not taking a burn, you're not taking super effective damage onto your own Brute Bonnet, whether that be through something like a Brave Bird, or at this point too, something that I'm seeing.
If you win the speed tie, you taunt and stop the Will-O-Wisp from happening.
Correct, which is, I think, exactly what James is going for here. The Fairy Terra onto that Brute Bonnet is going to at least make it so it is not taking some super effective damage from the opposing Talonflame, which would be absolutely huge, you know, to try and get that knockout of your Toler. Great Tusk protects, so a really nice call here, actually, from James. Going for that taunt, he gets the speed tie as well, so the Talonflame on Toler's side of the field is now taunted. Cannot go for something like Will-O-Wisp, which is exactly what happened to your Bullet Seed into that Protect on the Great Tusk. You're not too worried about that right now.
No, and at this point, because of the taunt, you can try to switch out Talonflame to reset it up, but both Tailwinds just petered out, meaning with this 5 HP Talonflame left, he has access to clicking Tailwind where Toler's does not because of that taunt, so you can get that speed buff back on your side, meaning Brute Bonnet would outspeed Great Tusk, and it just protected as well, so unless you want to risk the 30% chance of a double protect, there is a huge threat that Great Tusk could be hit super effectively with the Brute Bonnet, and you can't even change Terra typings because as a ground type, the Bullet Seeds would still be super effective.
This is 4D chess. This is absolutely some 4D chess I feel like we're dealing with right now. So many different things that these trainers are paying attention to. Looks like another Terra, though, onto this Great Tusk. Like we saw last game, that ground type Terra fully showing really an offensive versus defensive Terra type here. Right at this point in the game, Talonflame goes for that Tailwind. It is happy to have that speed boost for its partner Pokemon. That 5 HP is really paying dividends. Brute Bonnet's Bullet Seed, you can see how much more damage this does when you are not burnt. That is going to do well over half at this point, especially if you get the 5 there. It is going to bring that Great Tusk down to an incredibly low amount of HP. It will not be enough to knock out unless you get a critical hit. But no, right there is that 5. Brings that Great Tusk down into the red. Talonflame using Brave Bird thanks to that taunt into the Talonflame on the opposite side. I almost wonder if you would have rather have gotten damage onto the Brute Bonnet.
Yeah, especially because you're just going to take the recoil anyway, so would have brought it down a little bit lower, but Headlong Rush is a neutral attack into Brute Bonnet, so that's really strong, but with the double of a Brave Bird, that would have been a KO.
That would have been a KO. You also then take that special defense and defense drop. You will get knocked out if you take another Bullet Seed. Also that Life Orb recoil as well. Tatsugiri able to come in here. You have access to that Focus Sash on Tatsugiri, so it is going to take 2 attacks to get that knockout. So Toler is going to need to double down into it if he wants to get that out of the way.
And Tatsugiri has Muddy Water, which can hit both of these Pokemon super effectively. You're faster as well, both naturally and because Tailwind is up for James. So as long as both Muddy Waters would connect, we're not going to see double KO anyway because of Great Tusk protecting here. But in that moment, if Muddy Water connects, you can get a knockout.
Yeah, Muddy Water will, of course, go into that Protect. This is really the moment of truth here for James, right? Just kind of waiting for this animation. No Void here from the Talonflame, though. Spore from the Brute Bonnet at least covers for that. At a bare minimum, Talonflame is going to need to take a little bit of a nap this turn.
I just like the look like Brute Bonnet, like, really, Tatsugiri? I had to cover you there. That was the cleanest KO I've ever seen. Taunt has been taken off here, so Talonflame can try to click any attacks as long as it wakes up, which is obviously a very difficult spot to be in.
Yeah, it does kind of allow a double protect here right now. Toler is really pushing all of his luck at this point in the game. Tatsugiri's Muddy Water, of course, will not go into that protect. Once again, Toler probably has his fingers crossed, but no, not on this time. He is going to be able to take that knockout onto that Talonflame. And this means as well that Brute Bonnet, if it wanted to go for anything, it wasn't going to be able to kind of get that damage off at this point thanks to that double protect.
Yeah, that double protect is really nice because now Toler has 2 remaining Pokemon instead of if there was a double KO on that turn, you'd only have your 1 spot, and in a 2v1 situation, you really don't feel that great. But Iron Bundle is the last Pokemon on Toler's side. Can he get this 2-0, or is James going to force the game 3? Iron Bundle is at full HP. Tatsugiri still does have the Focus Sash as well, though, so it's going to take at minimum 2 hits to knock it out.
This might be something like like Earthquake Freeze Dry range, if that's kind of the move that you end up having to go for. But then do you go for something like a Protect? It really kind of depends. You had the Tailwind on your side as well, so that may be able to help out here. Tatsugiri's Muddy Water will be moving first. It is enough to knock out the Great Tusk, so this Iron Bundle is not going to be able to take out this Tatsugiri on this turn. It is going to probably have to deal with some damage as well from this Brute Bonnet, from something like a Bullet Seed, if it is, if it is not choosing to knock that Pokemon out. Bullet Seed from this Brute Bonnet, that is going to be enough to wrap that up, and that is going to make James go to a game 3 here with Toler.
Yeah, that is how you play it back. And James, 2 games in a row, not bringing Dondozo shows that he does not need that strategy to try to win the game. That was a lot longer of a game 2 than game 1 was. It was kind of decided like, 2 or 3 turns in the game 1, so that was much more back and forth, and this just showcases why James is such an incredible player. Where it looks kind of rough on that first turn here, was actually able to preserve later on, save his Terra typing for defensive purposes on Brute Bonnet, and Bullet Seed was able to take down the Great Tusk. Great Tusk seemed like such a great, for lack of a better word, option in this match. But if you're clicking protect 3 out of the 4 turns that you're on the field, you're not really providing enough damage to the other side.
Yeah, and I think something that's really interesting as well, right, was that he chose to use that offensive Terra on the Great Tusk multiple games in a row. If that's the option he continues to go with, is he going to have to be more mindful of the way that James has now decided he's going to play around that Great Tusk? By putting that Sandy Shocks in the beginning, you almost focused more energy upon it, and then you were able to use the targets into that Sandy Shocks to then allow your other Pokemon to do something to what that Great Tusk slot was. Is probably something that's interesting too. James heard me say Dondozo and was like, absolutely not, Maeve, no thanks, I don't need it. So I think at that point he is the right Pokemon.
That's the huge thing for Toler. I agree that James is bringing the 4 right Pokemon for this matchup. Does Toler recognize that Dondozo is not the play in this set? And if you do, you don't need Iron Bundle, Iron Bundle is the hardcore counter because of Freeze Dry, hitting it super effectively. You can adjust with Tyranitar that has Assault Vest, has Terra Flying, which you can hit Brute Bonnet super effectively with as a flying type into the grass. I wonder if Toler is going to come to the same conclusion that we have and that James had, is that Dondozo will not be brought in this set.
Looks like the exact same lead here from last game, though. Both of the Talonflames on either trainer's side, whereas James brings his Sandy Shocks, Toler brings his Fluttermane here. Some more photosynthesis stuff here for the special attack from that Sandy Shocks as well, and also onto that Fluttermane. So that is a really nice way, I think, to put that offensive pressure out. But here we are again at that speed tie. Do we try and see for taunts, or do you go right for Tailwind?
Well, that's what's scary about this matchup, because you essentially have to Tailwind, because if you don't, the other side has the speed, and then, say, Sandy Shocks can go for a hit into the Fluttermane there. So Talonflames are really not even allowed to choose an attack on this turn. They have to match Tailwinds.
Yeah, that Tailwind coming out. The Sandy Shocks here actually protecting, so not going to be taking some damage, whereas the Tailwind on Toler's side, we've been seeing the Talonflame on James' side move first every single turn at this point. It looks like right there a Moonblast into that Sandy Shocks, thanks to that protect, is not going to be taking all that damage like we saw in that last game.
And then now everybody is still full HP. The speed tiers essentially don't matter because the speed has been doubled for both sides, but Fluttermane does not want to get targeted down by the Sandy Shocks as well. You got to stay safe.
Yeah, Brave Bird from one Talonflame into the other, meaning James is going to take a good chunk of damage from Toler's. However, another Brave Bird targets into the protect of that Fluttermane. Not going to be taking any damage this turn. Sandy Shocks' Earth Power looks like a double up as well into that Fluttermane. So a great call there by Toler.
This is the healthiest Toler's Fluttermane has been the entire set. 2 turns in and it has taken no damage before it got knocked out super quickly in one of the previous games too. So by wasting these Tailwind turns, you can keep Fluttermane around and be really strong and maybe get a KO in response here.
Yeah, Talonflame going for the Brave Bird into that Fluttermane, but then also taking a Brave Bird from the opposing Talonflame. That is enough to knock it out at this turn. It is not going to be sticking around with 5 HP like we saw a lot last game. Earth Power from the Sandy Shocks, though. It was really nice of you to talk about how healthy Fluttermane was at that point, but it did not last another turn. Joe, I am so sorry.
Hey, it is what it is. Happens to the best of the Fluttermanes out there. Like we said, you know, it's sometimes bulky, but other times it's very frail, depending on what type of hit it's going into. And Sandy Shocks, of course, is getting that boost to it from the same type of attack bonus as a ground type there, makes the Earth Power even stronger.
Tatsugiri once again coming in. Iron Bundle, though, also on the opposite side of the field. I actually like seeing the Iron Bundle this early on instead of hiding in the back.
Yeah, that's a good point, because usually by the time Iron Bundle comes out too late, especially since it's not Focus Sash, it might be a little bit too late to hang on from some of the attacks. No Terrestrialization has been used yet from either of the sides in this matchup, so could it be up to Iron Bundle to try to save the day for Toler? And Sandy Shocks is still full HP in this match. It's not like going to Flying type really helps you, though, against the Ice type in Iron Bundle.
Yeah, Iron Bundle protecting this turn, though, definitely sees the danger that it is in. Talonflame just clicking Brave Bird every single turn does so much damage. You are taking a good chunk in recoil, but the amount of damage you're doing, I don't think you're too worried. This Thunderbolt as well from the Sandy Shocks. This is the first thing I feel like I've really seen Sandy Shocks do this entire game.
Yeah, and the Talonflame, which anything would be able to knock it out since it's not really trained to be bulky. That Dragon Beater goes into the protect, but fortunately for Toler, now Tatsugiri is very low HP. Any type of attack at this point would be able to knock it out. Toler is down to his final 2 Pokemon in Great Tusk and Iron Bundle, and there is no Tailwind left on either side, right? So these features are going to kind of naturally play out. Iron Bundle and Tatsugiri should be faster than Sandy Shocks and Great Tusk traditionally.
Yeah, I think at this point too, right? You're facing down the Pokemon that really does beat half of your team in that Great Tusk. Great Tusk is like, oh cool, there's a Sandy Shocks. There's probably also Brute Bonnet in the back, especially, you know, that Brute Bonnet is probably where you're trying to hold your Terastallization unless you try and go for it now. Because then if you go for it now, you're still taking super effective damage from something like the Freeze Drive from the Iron Bundle. That Iron Bundle also is Terra Ice. So it could go for something like a Terastallization and try not to take super effective damage from those Electric type attacks. Instead though, looks like we will be seeing that Iron Bundle does go for that Terra Ice, probably trying to boost the power as well for things like that Freeze Dry, whereas maybe trying not to take that super effective damage from things like that Sandy Shocks Electric type attacks, but Sandy Shocks is just going to protect this turn, not going to be putting out the offensive pressure. Iron Bundle uses Icy Wind though, and that should be enough damage thanks to that Ice type Terra to knock out this little Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri not able to do the things that I really wanted to, like last game, like getting those Muddy Waters off and just putting damage down and allowing that last Pokemon to kind of come in and clean up here. The everything that this Great Tusk is going to do, not going to matter thanks to this Protect, and that would have been that close combat.
That is a perfect call from Toler to go for the Icy Wind instead of Freeze Dry because it's a spread attack. Tatsugiri, you know, is the second fastest thing on the field right, at that moment. So if you can get rid of it, and even for the benefit of Sandy Shocks protecting, you took no damage on either of your Pokemon, and now, of course, Brute Bonnet seems like the likely Terra option, as Sandy Shocks would still be weak to Ice if turned into a Flying type, so it's not like that is going to help out too much. But because Iron Bundle does not have Focus Sash, any type of attack potentially could knock it out from full HP if it was strong enough, and the Great Tusk, as we saw in Game 2, Maeve, is able to hang on without the benefit of a crit through 5 Bullet Seed hits.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly like you said as well, too. Here is that Terastallization onto this Brute Bonnet with that Fairy typing. Makes the most sense here because this Pokemon would not hang on comfortably from anything from this Iron Bundle, like this Icy Wind, without this Terra here. It is still doing a nice chunk of damage. Sandy Shocks takes so much damage there, and this speed drop is going to be huge moving forward, allowing for its partner Pokemon to go for this close combat before taking any damage is enough to knock out that Sandy Shocks. You do take those defense drops here in both special defense and regular defense. However, I think at that point, you're not terribly worried because you could still go for some good moves, especially if you keep taking things like the Icy Winds. Bullet Seed into the Great Tusk. It did have a little bit of chip damage thanks to that Life Orb, so things might be a little bit different now. It looks really, really, really close, Joe. If one more should be enough. That is actually enough to knock out that Great Tusk, thanks to those defense and special defense drops.
Yeah, that is the unfortunate side effect of close combat. Last time that he was able to hang on through the Bullet Seed was at neutral defense. This time at -1, you're not going to be able to take those as well. Iron Bundle is now no longer weak to the Bullet Seed because it's just mono ice at this point. So it's going to come down to maybe the Hydro Pump or Freeze Dry if that's going to be better than these Bullet Seeds hitting. Is this a 2-hit KO?
It might be, but you also then have the risk of a freeze, which is what I was going to say. I was so ready for this freeze. When you allow your opponent to click Freeze Dry, you are giving them a chance to freeze you. You cannot click Spore. You cannot put that Iron Bundle to sleep.
Oh, that is terrible fate for James, as that freeze could potentially gift Toler the set.
And that is enough to get Toler the set here. A very, very close game between both of these players. Absolutely well played. Those freezes from those freeze dries, that's why you play them. Not only for the accuracy versus Hydro Pump, but it does give you a little bit of a chance there on RNG, but man, that must hurt if you're James.
Oh, 10% of the time it just gets swept away from you if you're James. We don't know what the calculation is with if 5 Bullet Seeds are able to knock out the Iron Bundle. It is typically not trained defensively. However, just like from its stat spread in general, sometimes it can deceptively live some hits you wouldn't think it would be able to. But that was just an incredible set. A Dondozo team that we never saw Dondozo in 3 games was a really fun adjustment that James made, but Toler made the best adjustment in that game 3 of bringing Iron Bundle earlier, not waiting until it was too late for that. And that the big thing with one of the prior turns, the Icy Wind into Sandy Shocks, it did a lot of damage, but importantly, it made it slower than the Great Tusk at that point, so you could get the final KO. So I think Toler just played that end game beautifully.
I said 4D chess earlier in the match. It really did. It felt like 4D chess because these players are thinking, I can go for this turn, then you will not be able to attack me before I can get, you know, like you said, these speed tiers, these drops. You're also playing to, you know, for Toler, his win condition was getting that freeze. That was his win condition because he was going to take a Spore and then you would possibly be dealing with a Bullet Seed, at least for 1 guaranteed turn, you know, a pretty good chance you'd have it for 2 or 3. So even if it wasn't a one-hit knockout, things could have gotten pretty dicey. So I think at that point, you are fishing for that freeze, and if you are Toler, you are like, thank goodness I got that freeze to continue on undefeated into what is obviously a really crazy day of Pokemon for both of these trainers.
Yeah, a lot of people compare VGC to chess, but that one definitely felt more like chess boxing with 2 Titans going back and forth, blow to blow for James and Toler. That was just an incredible set.
Yeah, absolutely insane, right? I think we got to see a lot of the power of all of these Paradox Pokemon and how great they can be, but also, you and I, we spoke about this, and I will bring this point back. Tatsugiri is a good Pokemon in this format, even without Dondozo. It does a lot of things really well. It has some great move opportunities. Carrying a move like Taunt is really nice because then you may be able to help with some of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. You know, you're not a prankster Pokemon, so you can go for Taunt onto anybody on the opposite side, not just avoiding things like those dark types. You have Icy Wind, you have Muddy Water. You can really help your own Pokemon and even go for something like a Draco Meteor just to put damage down.
Yeah, I think it's really funny if you think about, because we haven't seen James's whole you know, day. It's the first time we've seen him on stream, but I wonder if this is the first set that he actually did not bring Dondozo in at all, and mentally is like, all right, well, that's the last set that I don't bring Dondozo because he lost in that kind of fashion. But I just think, you know, I do think James was a lesser skilled trainer would have forced Dondozo into that match, especially the game 3, as you get a little nervous there, maybe even the game 2 after losing game 1. But because James is such a strong trainer, he understood that it really was not relevant in that matchup. But I just think Toler just one-upped him a little bit. They had so many similar strategies with the Talonflames and Tailwind, and you know, trying to avoid some of those super effective hits with their Terra typing and whatever. But Toler just had that one last leg up, which was the freeze.
And you know, sometimes if that's the cards that you're dealt, you know, not to make a TCG reference, but if that's the cards you're dealt, then that's the cards you're dealt, right? You're like, I know I got lucky. It's tough to, you know, when you're that player and you're running things with those 10% chances, you know what you're getting into, you know what you're dealing with. Not everybody is running things like Covert Cloak, you know, it's not exactly going to deal with that secondary effect, and Brute Bonnet was unfortunately the victim of that freeze. I think for both of those trainers though, that was, you said it like chess boxing, right? That was a slog for both of them. It was even pretty much those entire games. It never felt like there was a clear winner of every turn until things kind of started to creep into the end of where those trainers were like, all right, you can see their win con in the next 3 turns. You can see their board state, what they want to be at. And those trainers were looking very far ahead to trying to get to that board state that they wanted to be at. And I think both of them got really close by the end. Like, it wasn't like one player got there first and then easily won.
Yeah, I mean, they both did get 1 turn away from victory in the end, which is as close as you can physically get. And that's the type of matches that we really appreciate. You know, I just think in my day as an Alolan Ninetales apologist, I've used freeze dry a lot over the years, and it feels like it freezes more than 10% of the time, which I'm not complaining about because I've used it to my benefit there. But that's just, it's so cool to see how back and forth these matches can be from the best players within all of North America and in the world.
Yeah, I was a Ice Beam Porygon 2 player, so I also got quite a lot of freezes. Either way, though, I do definitely understand kind of being an apologist for that. Really exciting to have both of these players, though, show us what is truly such an excellent match and such a nice example of the excitement that Series 2 can bring. I don't know if you guys were able to hear the audience and the crowd, because I could hear it through my headset when that freeze went off.
The crowd's massive.
The crowd is massive. I mean, our stream setup, you are seeing you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of people. I don't know how many there were at, because especially with those longer games, you have people that are playing and finishing up their round and then moving over to the streams table and seeing what is going on with those matches. So it gets pretty rowdy in here when things kind of pop off like that, which is always so exciting to kind of feel that energy of.
Yeah, it's one of the best parts when you hear the crowd react the same way that we do and the same way the players are reacting. Like the synergy, those moments of a Hydro Pump miss or a Will-O-Wisp burn or a huge crit, or in this case a freeze. It's just like, as a community, we're all like, we've been there.
Yeah,
you know?
I've been there. I have been on the receiving end of that for sure. I know that we are going to be jumping actually to a quick break here, so do not go anywhere, guys. I'm sure we will be back pretty shortly thereafter, and keep on watching these regionals.
I may have been exiled from my comfy couches, my comfy seats, but I'm still joined by our winner of the last round, Toler Webb. Toler, obviously you've had a moment to catch your breath. You're quite lucky in this one, but I kind of want to go back, pick up right where that game left off. Final freeze dry. Was that the plan all along, or was that the out?
At that point, it was the only way I was winning that game. Well, okay, it wasn't the only way. There was another line where I freeze dried, he spored, he bullet seeded, I slept a turn,
and then
I woke up protected, and then called the sucker punch. That was the only other way I had to win, which, I mean, it was higher chance than getting a freeze, but...
I don't know. I've not crunched the numbers on it. I think it's a longer way round, so I do appreciate your way through that game. But a big relief, honestly, you guys play fantastic across both games. A lot of credit to actually all three games. You guys both play fantastic. But I kind of want to zoom back out, something I'm kind of talking about. We've obviously moved to Series 2. We've got a lot of new teams, a lot of new ideas coming to the fore. How did you kind of end up on this team? At the top of the day, I was talking to Rosemary and Sierra, and I kind of mentioned like Great Tusk wasn't really for me. You've obviously settled on it and just shown that I am particularly wrong. So, you know, how did you settle on, when faced with this new set of Pokemon, you've got, I believe it's 3 of the Paradox Pokemon?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, how did that come to be?
Well, so the foundation of this team, and I think I can be quick here. The foundation of the team is Talonflame Fluttermane, which I led all 3 of those games, so anyone watching, that's your trick. Foundation of the team is Talonflame Fluttermane. Fluttermane doesn't like steel types. Fluttermane doesn't like poison types. Fluttermane doesn't like rock types and sand. Fluttermane doesn't like fire types. So all of those are weak to ground. So the idea is that you bring your Fluttermane and your Talonflame and you say, how do you deal with this very powerful Fluttermane with a booster energy? Which is like pretty similar to a Sylveon from Series 1. And then you say, okay, you're going to deal with it with your poison type. That's awesome. Good game. Here comes Great Tusk.
So the whole plan is just kind of bait them to deal with the Fluttermane, and then bring in Great Tusk to deal with it.
That is the basic construction of the entire team, yeah.
What about the other 3?
They don't matter. No, you kind of need the Iron Bundle for the Dondozo matchup, and you saw me bringing it every one of those games. Just so that you can freeze dry the Dondozo, you can maybe wisp it, you can tailwind it, but it's really important to have damage threat on the Dondozo. And then fundamentally, you need a dark type on this kind of team. You have 3 options, really. King Gambit's kind of one of them, so I guess that can be 4. But you have Tyranitar, Hydreigon, and Brute Bonnet.
Yep.
Hydreigon is the most painful for NDD Armigers to fight, so that's the one I'm on, basically.
Yep.
And then the other slot is kind of filler. But you have a lot of bad matchups, and I feel like Gothitelle helps me with those. Okay,
no, it makes a lot of sense to me, being able to you know, kind of cover those weaknesses. Does the Gothitelle get much play, or something you've been leaving at home today?
Well, it is kind of a 5-mon team, but the Gothitelle covers a lot of really important matchups, because since the team is so offensive, it's very vulnerable to teams that can reposition easily. So the Gothitelle is really just punishing teams that want to reposition against you, and forcing them to take a bunch of damage. Think Sajan's 2014 Worlds team. It's the same essential idea.
Yeah, no, I really like it. Being able to cause those problems just makes a lot of sense. So obviously you've picked 3 of them. This is something I've been catching up with a lot of people. Paradox Pokemon came in Series 2. What's your kind of? Let's just go with a quick read on it. I know you're a big fan of the Great Tusk. Obviously, you know you've got the 2 other.
I don't actually like Great Tusk very much.
Okay.
It gets KO'd so easily. It's so vulnerable.
That's my concern with it, right? Is it's like you get one big turn and then you're done, right? Yeah. You're done for the game. But if you had to pick one, maybe of the 3, or maybe something you've been looking at, what's the top Paradox Pokemon for you?
I think Iron Bundle is the most impactful in the format. I personally like using Flutter Main the most because
Okay.
the instant pressure, the flexibility across a variety of sets, and you can do some really creative things with how you train it and make it do a ton of different stuff.
All right, that's something I've heard a couple of times now. Is people are saying that there's actually a little bit more to the Paradox Pokemon than the standard set. So zooming into your tournament again, obviously you are no stranger to top tables. Your accomplishments definitely speak for themselves. I know of you from previous years, but you're currently still undefeated. You've obviously got a long tournament to go. How are you feeling at this juncture? Looking forward to the next 4 rounds that you got ahead of you.
Well, I'm very nervous. I've been nervous all week. Actually, I've had trouble sleeping all week because I really want to do well this tournament.
Okay.
And so, I mean, these next 4 rounds are just fresh rounds for me, each and every one of them. And if I get another freeze dry freeze, sick. If I take a loss, then great, I'm learning. I'm just coming back to this after having to focus on school for a while. So anything I get is good, It's so fun to be here. It's the best place. Yeah.
I feel like I remember talking to you before you went to focus on school at a different regional many moons ago. Obviously coming back, is this the comeback season? Is this the year? Is this the toppest of top tables again?
It really depends on whether I lose the next 4 rounds. I am intending to attend at least 2 more regionals in the Southeast.
So that'll put you Knoxville
and Charlotte. Yeah,
Okay.
Charlotte's kind of a hometown regional for me. North Carolina, strong, sweet potatoes. Yeah, that was probably a weird statement.
I'm going to be honest, as not a resident of the US, well, resident of the US, but not particularly well versed, could you please explain the sweet potatoes
You
comment?
can find North Carolina sweet potatoes in Germany. They're all over the place.
Is this the home of sweet potatoes?
It's like one of the bigger ones.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to quote a statistic. I don't know where we are production-wise right now.
Okay.
I don't have my finger on the pulse of the sweet potato farms.
But you just know it's a thing.
It's totally a thing.
Okay.
Sweet potatoes are a thing.
I'm going to have to do some research on that because that's something new that I got to learn over the course of this weekend. But no, I genuinely think it's lovely to see you back at these tables. Being able to see you perform well, fantastic as well going forward. So anything, I don't want to speak it into existence, but it's only fair because I ask everyone else. You're worried about the next round. If you had to avoid something, what are you trying to avoid?
Playing James Baek again. Playing James Baek again. That would be really bad.
Well, that's Swiss means you won't play him again.
I know. Okay, I have to be honest. There are some really exceptional players here today. Emilio Forbes is here. Wolf Glick is here. I don't think I can play him.
Okay.
I don't think I can play Aaron Trailer, but I mean, there are some really exceptional players still playing in this tournament, still at XO. I don't think I'm afraid of anything because I'm happy for every chance I get to experience this while I still have the time to. But I'd say, matchup-wise, I think I can win every matchup. At worst, I'm 45-55. So I'm just afraid of people that are really great players that are going to put a lot of pressure on me.
Well, you're definitely up there. You've got the accomplishments.
And I can hit my freezes.
Yeah. How many have you hit today? Is that the first one?
That's the first one, yeah.
Okay, so now the ball's rolling. That's what I'm saying.
We're moving.
Now you've got one. They're just going to keep coming. They're like buses, and you'll be hitting freeze every single time. Or when you need it. Let's save it for when you need it.
If I make cut, I might cry.
You're in prime position, right?
Yeah.
You're undefeated right now. Obviously, a little bit more to play, but I think you'll be in good standing. So I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for coming and sitting with me, talking through your team a little bit. Good luck in the rest of your games. Don't let the other players know. Obviously, I'm talking to a number of people this weekend, but you are my favorite.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure you said that to everyone you've interviewed.
Can't confirm or deny that, Toler, but it's absolutely
The stream knows.
Yeah, some people may be able to grasp me up, but it's by the by. Alas, we'll be taking a very short break, and we'll be back with more action here in Orlando.